This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Kyle Warrenshaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA, special edition of The Baseline. Breaking news in the association. Got to get into it, man. Got to put our imprint on it. So, of course, I'm going to roll out the red carpet to my man, www.shawsports.net. Big Kahuna, my man, Mr. Warren Shaw, repping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Mr. Shaw, the NBA just never fails, man. We just want the brothers trying to get a little bit of shut-eye. Eyes wide shut up in this piece, man. Eyes wide shut.
Well, at least the news broke in the middle of the afternoon. So in the middle of our proverbial work days, and just like, oh man. So if we were trying to take a week off, let our last show breathe a little bit, great content. Can't even just do that, man. We got to come out here and double up on the week. So hopefully our fans listeners will appreciate, the double time here that we're putting in. But the NBA, as you alluded to, 0 days without some drama and some exciting
CrossFit, some double unders. Double unders.
Man, yeah.
Anyway, all right. So if you've been paying attention to your feeds, if you've been paying attention to anything that generates sports news towards the NBA, the Miami Heat have pulled off a whopper of a trade, in my opinion. Didn't see that one coming. And the Milwaukee Bucks, it's just, horns up and just lit up. Adrian Griffin is no longer the head coach, so they done bucked him out the door. Where do you want to go with this, Shaw? Where do you want to start first? Do you want to start with the trade, or do you want to start with the boot?
Yeah, we can start with how the news broke, in essence, so the Rozier trade first, because we can keep our fans, listeners here, waiting for what I think is the more juicy conversation when it comes to Adrian Griffin and some of the vitriol that I think is also surrounding that overall situation.
Right. Okay. So let's talk about the trade that happened with the Miami Heat and the Charlotte Hornets. The Miami Heat were able to acquire your young son, Scary Terry, send him over to Miami from the Charlotte Hornets for Kyle Lowry and a first-round pick. It's interesting, Shaw, because I figured that the reason why you would want to talk about this first wasn't just because of the appetizing vitriol, but because of something that I think we discussed all the way back to NBA Media Day. And I'm not saying that we were trying to be, provocateurs or predictors about something not quite right when it came to Lowry and the Miami Heat. But as you see this season, roll past, it was quite evident that the Miami Heat's plans did not include a future with Kyle Lowry. And to be able to acquire a talent like Terry Rozier, I think is people may not speak on it, but I think is a significant acquisition to be added to that team that I don't think people are going to recognize and realize until we see, further on into the remainder of this season.
Well, for the Miami Heat, they get an absolute upgrade at the overall position. So yes, there's going to be some questions of what Rozier is going to be able to do in air quotes Heat culture. Can he acquiesce? Is there enough ball to go around with he and Tyler Hero, who are both kind of shot first type creators, if you will? But I think in the interim time, while Jimmy Butler is taking his siesta, which he does, Jimmy Butler's a great player, but he's going to play 45 to 50 games each year and then going to be there for the playoffs. So Rozier is a great minutes eater, if you will, or like I have to say in baseball, an innings eater through the course of the regular season. But now when they need to get everybody together, that's where we're going to see, can he make his hay and get in line with Heat culture? I will give Miami Heat all the credit in the world. I'm sure they did their due diligence before making a deal of this situation. But this was really about, in a lot of ways, not only the upgrade, but getting Kyle Lowry out the books, who has been pretty much a malcontent for the entirety of his Heat career. And I don't say those words lightly, but as you alluded to, when I was at Media Day to begin the season, he just didn't have it. And I think there's been some more stuff more recently in their more recent trip to Toronto. There were some dust ups going on behind the scenes, and then he wasn't starting again. And they were just like, listen, it's time to go ahead and, and cut bait here. And they get a great, I think, upgrade in Terry Rozier, 2 years left on his deal. They'll be able to figure that out, and we'll see what Charlotte ultimately ends up doing with Kyle Lowry. But they get a first-round pick, although protected in 2027, lottery protected, and then unprotected in 2028. So the proverbial potential good deal for both sides. And Charlotte is clearly not done, according to Woj. More things are going to be happening there. But swinging it back to Miami, my only concern is, can he fit in line with how Spoelstra wants him to play, being the lead point guard? Yes, he's averaging the most assists he's ever averaged in his career, but on a losing team in a different situation. Now, can he go there and do this in a winning situation, and the Heat have championship expectations? And we'll see if Terry Rozier is up to that task.
Well, I'm going to lean on the fact that Terry Rozier has been a part of a winning organization and has done the things necessary. If he can, kind of like hit the rewind button. Remember, he was in that great run with the Boston Celtics, got themselves all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals when they got ousted by the Cleveland Cavaliers, right? And then started the journey about where should Terry Rozier be, because clearly the Celtics didn't do enough to keep him. Now, with that being said, I parsed that out in saying, how much of this will the pivot be for Eric Spoelstra to find a way to utilize Terry Rozier? I know that the questions are going to be whether or not Terry Rozier can fit in the Heat culture, but I think now is the time that you really have to take a step back if you're the Miami Heat and evaluate and assess where your strengths and your weaknesses lie. If what you're saying is that you're going to wait until Jimmy Butler comes from his siesta, that means that you need to have the reticent parts already ready to go. It's not typical that you see the Miami Heat make a move to bring a guy in. Normally, they're digging in their G League bag in order to bring guys up who it's easy and is coachable for Spoelstra. But clearly, there is a window that the Miami Heat are playing with. And now with the improvements of the Indiana Pacers, the improvements of the Philadelphia 76ers as far as their roster is constructed, the Miami Heat does not have a lot of wiggle room to, quote unquote, experiment. They need proven guys, proven players. So I agree with you. I think the Miami Heat, for the first time, actually did their due diligence in picking up a player who I think is hungry enough and is willing to do what's necessary. But I think on the other side of it, if you are Eric Spoelstra, you have got to figure out a way to utilize Terry Rozier to be as effective a player down these stretches of games that he's going to be an important X factor for the Miami Heat's possible chances to try to make another run to get to the NBA Finals, because it is not going to be easy this year around coming. I think with the way teams are set up, this will probably be the toughest road for the Miami Heat to get through for them to get to an NBA Finals. So that's where my take is on this. It's a great move, but I think the other side of that coin, Shaw, is not so much the players conceding to the Heat culture, but the Heat culture's adaptability to the type of talent that they're bringing to get them up to speed to compete.
Well, I think that is a very unique point. And I think, Kyle Lowry is going to be the only person in recent history who's probably going to, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but probably like, what? I don't know if that culture truly existed for him or if he didn't want to acquiesce, because I don't think the culture does acquiesce to players and how and their style. I just don't think it does. And if you listen to UD, who's been on just a rant on his podcast, just like this flag planter of Heat culture, and every chance he gets, it's getting a little irritating from my standpoint, but it's just like, all right, we get it, bro. And I think, I just can't imagine Kyle Lowry being in line with that. But if it is as indoctrinating as UD is alluding to and everybody else is alluding to, I think Terry Rozier would be hard pressed to feel like, okay, they're going to change some things around him. Yes, they'll run some plays and things like that fit his skill set, but he's going to have to acquiesce to the way Spoelstra wants him to play and the culture, if you will, that currently exists. I'm just going to put this out here. The combination of he and Hero is either going to be amazing or it's going to be awful. I see no way there's any in between in that. There's no chance. Oh, it's just okay. It's mediocre. Either they're going to be best friends or they're going to be just adversarial and not even be able to play together on sometimes on the court. I'm really concerned about, again, the shot diets of both of those guys and the ability to kind of get everybody involved, especially Hero with all the trade rumors that he was more recently involved in over the summer, settled into a nice role here, having a great season, averaging 22, 5-4, 4 dimes for this Miami Heat team. I just think it's an interesting move. I understand why they did it. I understand the aspects and the risk involved, and I would probably still make the move, but it's not without an eyebrow raised as to how everything will work out when everything is said and done. Well,
let's put it like this. If I don't know what's probably going to be more intimidating, Scary Terry or Udonis Haslem staring at Scary Terry.
Oh yeah, and you know it's going to be around. The first thing I say, we don't play like that here, bro. We don't, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I don't want to get on that's definitely a tangent or a conversation for another day.
Absolutely. You're tuned to the Baseline. Kyle Lowry, Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. All right, Shaw, let's pivot ourselves to the big topic at hand, and that is the Bucks relieving or parting ways with Adrian Griffin.
Well, let's back up and not to be, dismissive in any ways, but there was another team involved in the deal. And I think, we're talking about the Charlotte Hornets, right? And,
my apologies. And sorry to Hornets fans, no disrespect. I thought
get it in and get it out. I hear you, bro.
I thought maybe Kyle Lowry would speak on it more so than we would.
Well, only in the aspect that I think, as alluded to, the reporting is that Charlotte is not done, right? So what happens now with LaMelo there and Brandon Miller as the two key lynch points of that team? Yes, they'll try to flip Lowry. They're not going to just buy him out. They'll try to flip him and see if they get anything for him, maybe 2 seconds or something like that for another team. But the fact that Miles Bridges now is off on the table, PJ Washington, who they didn't necessarily need to re-sign this offseason, but I guess if they're able to flip him for something, that turns into a potential deal. And for lack of a better phrase, the corpse, if you will, of Gordon Hayward, what ends up happening with that situation? Can they flip him on the last year of his deal, or do they just say, we're going to buy him out, or they let him play it out? I don't know. Everybody is on the table here with the exception of Miller and LaMelo. And to me, that signals another kind of failed era in Charlotte history. And I take this back to when, a couple years ago, and you and I both 1000% agreed on this. Steve Clifford, why did you come back? Look what's happened. Look what's happened. You couldn't have possibly come back and expected this to be your fate. Yes, LaMelo was out majority of last season. He's been in and out of lineup this year as well, too. But this has just been a roller coaster, not even a roller coaster. That's too kind. It's just been a downward spiral ever since last season.
Can I speak to something, though, real quick? And I just want to bring it back to the trade for Kyle Lowry. See, this to me, from a business perspective, Shaw, they're going to do exactly what is often outlined in the business sense of doing, NBA business. You get a player over, and for contractual reasons, you're probably going to try to flip him, or you're going to try to move him. If you really, really think about it, if you're the Charlotte Hornets and you're Charlotte Hornets brass, name me the last time that you actually had an adequate veteran player who can actually sit down with your young star and really hone in and figure out a way that he changes how he prepares himself for the vigors of an NBA season. Name me anyone on that roster that the Charlotte Hornets have had to really show and implement to LaMelo Ball what it's going to take for him to be the professional. And I'm not saying that he isn't a professional. What I'm saying is that, and we talk about this all the time, your best ability is availability. And we can sit here until we're blue in the face and talk about, what players can do, can't do. It means nothing if they're not on the basketball court. And it's clearly something in his regimen, in his off-season preparation, that is not affording him the ability to be on that basketball court. We can chalk it up to freak accidents all we want to, but how many times have we seen superstars maligned because they didn't change something that they could have changed, but they never had the proper guidance? They didn't have the proper person in their ear showing them, tutoring them, getting them to understand what it's going to take for you to be able to go through the rigors of an NBA season. And I'm just saying that if you're the Charlotte Hornets, fine, You're not planning to keep Kyle Lowry, understandable, but Kyle Lowry has been proven. You look at Kyle Lowry, he defies the logic of what the prototype NBA players typically are, and he has outlasted what most other guards can't even get themselves out of 3-4 years in the league to do. He's been able to do through numerous teams, and he has a chip to show for it. You would think that kind of veteranship should have an impact on a bunch of guys who are just waywards, don't know how to win, don't know how to play together, don't know how to find it within themselves. And the fact that the Hornets are already looking to move him just speaks more volumes about the Hornets' leadership and the focus and prioritization about what success is and winning is from the top down.
I'm going to stand up for Charlotte only in this aspect here. They're saying they're going to try to move him because he's a veteran guy who has championship level experience and doesn't fit their proverbial timeline. And I think otherwise, if they were just buying him out, I'd be like, all right, well, yeah, they're not trying to do much here. But if they try to shop him and they don't, then chances are he stays on the roster.
I get it.
I will say this though, I would be hard pressed to believe in his veteran leadership, even with my young point guard in LaMelo Ball, given the situation he just came out of in Miami. And yes, I think everyone around the leagues knows the Heat culture is one that is not tailor-made for the players, right? It's hard to work within that set.
Is it unique?
Let's call it that. Let's go with that.
Use that word. You don't even want to use that word. Yeah. Okay.
So, but I think if he's coming off what is what would say a negative situation, can he now accept the role and turn that around here in Charlotte? And I think the Hornets, they would have to vet that for themselves and have conversations with Kyle to figure that out. But I wouldn't want to just assume just because he has the years in the league, yes, he is an NBA champion. And for the most part, I think really prior to the Miami days, was a really, really good locker room presence for all other accounts. Could he now turn that back around here in Charlotte? I don't think we can take that for granted as a yes. And I'm not saying that he can't either, but that's where I think Charlotte is like, well, we're going to kick the tires on all options here, including trading him to see if we can get additional assets, because again, they're tearing it down to the studs. So if they end up moving Bridges, and they end up moving, Mark Williams and Nick Richards and PJ Washington and all that, then you know what it is. We're in the asset accumulation game. And if Kyle Lowry can give us more draft assets for the future, then that makes more sense, even more so than having him quote unquote tutor or mentor LaMelo Ball, where he can bring in other veterans who might be up to that proverbial task.
Probably. But I'm gonna liken this not by the player stature, but by the scenario. I liken this back to what the Clippers did in moving Chris Paul over to the Oklahoma City Thunder, and you had that small window that Chris Paul's influence on SGA, and look at what we have now with SGA. Right. You know what I'm saying? Now, I am not trying to compare Kyle Lowry to Chris Paul, okay? But the point that I was just alluding to, Shaw, is even if you're trying to rip everything down to the studs, if you're trying to sell me on the idea that LaMelo Ball is still the cornerstone of this franchise, and you're going to move everything else, you still leave nothing for LaMelo Ball to hold himself up to hold himself accountable to. Because even if you think LaMelo Ball listens to Steve Clifford, come on, man. You know what I'm saying? Like, no disrespect to Steve Clifford. He's a respected coach, but what has he really done that is going to resonate with LaMelo Ball and his views, his vision, and his future about him still being a Charlotte Hornet? Okay. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not saying that Kyle Lowry is in the right. I'm just saying, for the purposes of our conversation, to me, it would be helpful when you see that you get these type of players, but they don't even stay in the locker room long enough to have a conversation with knowing who's on the roster, because you're quick to think about the business aspect of it and moving him rather than where there could be some promise of opportunity that could be helpful to the player, to the organization, this, that, and the third.
Well, again, I'm not poo-pooing the idea, but I can understand where Charlotte is ultimately coming from, and we'll see if Lowry is on this team past February 8th. Time will tell.
Time will tell, or we'll see another Lowry scowl. Then during their media day, they don't have much basketball to look forward to, so they have a lot of media days. Yeah. How about that? You're tuned to the Baseline. Kyle Lee, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And so we're saving the best for last. Am I okay to roll out on this one now?
Let's roll out.
Let's roll out on this one. So the Milwaukee Bucks have decided to part ways with Adrian Griffin. That's me just being nice. Everywhere else, everyone's just said the Milwaukee Bucks have fired Adrian Griffin. He is no longer the head coach, despite the Milwaukee Bucks having a 30-13 record. As we sit here and have this conversation, Shaw, I think everybody is saying they're all shocked and awe and all that other kind of stuff. And I can't believe that us, Stephen A. Smith, and a few other people, which, you know, minus all of the character, you know, and the crazy that comes out of it, you know what I'm saying, you know, going bloviating is how he chooses it. All of that kind of stuff, you put that to the side. We were saying it was going to come to this. And the fact that it happened, I don't think it really surprises me. However, I do think it surprises me in doing it because you knew that it was going to raise questions about who is running the asylum. And it is evident that it's the players. Specifically
30-13. Yeah, 30-13 record. First year head coach, second in the Eastern Conference, still championship odds.
Black head coach.
Yep.
Okay.
You know, still have championship odds here.
Help in this situation.
But their defense has slipped. And I think that's where everybody's trying to point to. I'll just be honest with you. I'm not buying it. I'm just not buying it. Yes, the Bucks are playing the worst defense they've played, you know, since the Budenholzer era, right? Since pre that time. I get it. I absolutely get it. But you can't tell me incremental improvements can't be made. And you acquired basically a matador, while a Hall of Fame player in Dame Lillard, but he's a matador defensively. So what exactly was Griffin supposed to do, and why wasn't he given an opportunity, in essence, to continue down this path? And as you ended your last point, it's because there was a player and coach issue. This has nothing to do with just the defense. And I think that's an easy thing to hang it on, but let's be real here. Here, he and Giannis seem to be bristling a little bit. Terry Stotts, Dame's guy from the Portland days, quit as an associate head coach before the season even fully got underway. He stepped away from the situation. And it just seemed like Griffin was not maybe making the friends he needed to make. There was a little bit of a blow up in the first Celtics home game that the Bucks played. You know, where the Celtics won that game and Giannis didn't want to come out, and they kind of had a little issue at the scorer's table. To me, this more is about the personality more than just the coaching. Because you can't tell me at 30-13, second in offensive rating with the guy who they know doesn't play defense at the point guard. Okay, well, this is all about just the defense in that of itself. And as we spoke about the Pacers not just too long ago, that's a team who, while they're not in the top 20 defensively overall, the last 15 games, they're in the top 20 defensively. So you couldn't say that Griffin couldn't have started to work to get a better defense, especially in the second half of the season, post-trade deadline. Maybe they make a move or two for a couple defensive stoppers and they implement a new scheme. This is clearly about personality more than anything else. And it's in some ways it's unfortunate, but this game isn't for everybody. And the last thing that I'll say this, and maybe it's a point we need to make later on, the fact that Doc Rivers is a leading candidate for this is really, really interesting and comes off as a little bit of foul play based on some of the media reporting. I don't know, Doc. You know, I think for all intents and purposes, you know, we're Celtics guys. We've really appreciated what he was able to do for the Celtics organization. KG, Pierce, Rondo, they all love him. They all love him. But there is some stuff out there that he's not always. Doc is about Doc. And I think if you go to believe the reporting here that he consulted, with Adrian Griffin in the in-season tournament, there's some stuff out here now saying that Doc might have been like, well, he seems like a good guy, but maybe I could do this better. And he's now the leading candidate in the house here to land that job. And it just comes off as a little. It comes off as a little foul, but we don't know all the details. So while I'm definitely leading us down a pathway here, we don't know all the details here. And I'd like to give Doc the benefit of the doubt, but it doesn't seem right from the outward looking in.
All right. So what do you want? So where do you want me to go first? You want me to go and address that particular point about the Doc Rivers rumors, or do you want me to address the point about really what I believe ultimately led to Griffin's.
Well, I mean, let's acquit Adrian, I think, appropriately. Then we can kind of go into who's his replacement might be.
Okay. So as far as I'm concerned, okay, I believe that Adrian Griffin was let go because, and you just alluded to it, because he is not resonating with the players. Okay. I would be very curious to see, while they have a 30-13 record, I'm more curious about how the Milwaukee Bucks have played up to above 500 or contending basketball teams. Because in my opinion, even while the 30-13 record is impressive, the losses that they have amassed against the better teams in the NBA speaks more to the lack of either preparation or the lack of adjustments, which tells me that this situation with Griffin taking over this team is completely above his skis. It either means he wasn't qualified to be in this role or he wasn't ready to be in this role. Now, that doesn't mean that he can't eventually be a great head coach, but you can't inherit this kind of talent and not figure out a way to get these guys to buy into what it is that you're selling. And it just seemed like he was struggling that from the jump. And I said this from the very beginning, Shaw. I don't know where he fell on the spectrum as far as was he a true Budenholzer holdover, or was he somebody that is kind of, he chummied up to the right people. He you know what I'm saying? He rubbed elbows with the right people, the right executives. And when the decision was made, it seemed a more practical decision to make because they didn't want to upend the apple cart with this team because it's already a good roster. And they were already taking heat for knowing that they were going to get rid of Drew Holiday. So it was all going to be bad if this did not go right. You see what I'm saying? And unfortunately, a guy like Griffin knew that coming in, that he would be on pins and needles, and the struggle getting out of the gate for this team, I think it already put him in the hot seat. So I'm not saying that he cannot eventually be a great coach. I just don't think the situation was set up for him to succeed if he was not prepared for what was going to happen if this team did not show that they are as good as advertised. And that's the struggle, no matter how you slice it. That's the struggle.
Yeah. Well, I'm only going to follow up in this last thing, and definitely we kind of get on in the Doc situation. I don't know what is the right amount of time, and clearly Milwaukee felt like this was it. If they really felt like it wasn't going to get better, then you can applaud them for being.
This was good. I'm not even saying that this was good by the Bucks. I think that this was an asinine move by the Bucks. This did nothing because you know what it did, Shaw? It highlighted the fact that the players are running the asylum, which is exactly what you don't want in this NBA culture, in the sports culture, in the sports climate. It's the wrong message of player empowerment because ultimately it's basically putting it on Giannis and Damian Lillard to say, we know what's best for this team. Even if you go out and you get Doc Rivers, you're basically putting it on, we got to go win a championship to validate us getting rid of a head coach who we were still successful under despite not getting along with. Name me situations in which head coaches have had successful records and guys in the locker room are ready to like yoke the head coach, right? And it was interesting. ESPN talked about it. One of the analysts or one of the commentators on Around the Horn. The last time that this occurred, where a head coach was let go after their team is like 17, 18 games above 500. David Blatt of the Cleveland Cavaliers. Who takes over? Tyronn Lue. What they go do? Win the championship that year against the Golden State Warriors. Now, I'm not saying that is the situation that we're seeing here, but what I'm saying is that this is what it can come down to. And if these guys are not ready to make good on that, it just makes it look all bad all season long about how this went down and what was perceived.
No, I think it does look bad, and there's little doubt in certain circles of the NBA, Twitter, or X, whatever. They're definitely calling for not anyone's head per se, but for more scrutiny of the way Giannis may be as a superstar leader, within the NBA ethos, if you will. Super nice guy, has got a lot going for him. Comes from nothing, humble beginnings, the whole nine. And I don't want to say but we're in a situation where it seems like there's some issues that he has, and the Milwaukee Bucks are doing everything they possibly can to acquiesce to him. And that is today's sports world, not just the NBA. That's today's sports world. And so if he didn't like Adrian Griffin, well, Adrian Griffin is no longer here despite being 30-13.
All right. So now we're talking about the rumors about Doc Rivers possibly getting the head coaching nod. Listen, you say Doc handles Doc. I would be very careful if I don't know what it is, man. Head coach. This is probably the reason why I don't think I could ever see myself being a head coach, because to get power drunk, like how some dudes are, this level of defiance and thinking that they can go out and just take a team and, get them to the promised land or get them a championship. I understand. I get it. Doc got his chip, man. The Celtics helped him get his chip. He got that chip for the Celtics, and the Celtics got him that chip.
Yep.
Yeah, just right off into the sunset, bro. Because if he does not make good on getting them, if he does get this nod, it is going to tarnish his legacy. He has already been mired in a level of he was only good because of Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce, Ray Allen, and that 08 Celtics team, because he was never able to get another championship with that iteration, and he's always been mired in a level of mediocrity, especially with his egregious playoff record, right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting to me that even if you are the Milwaukee Bucks, I don't know why you would entertain the idea of doing this and saying we're going to go and we're going to bring, Doc Rivers into the fold, because he's going to bring something in that Adrian Griffin didn't give us, that you're clearly seeing was more about the players than it really is about the person. But if you're thinking to me from a schematics perspective that Doc Rivers is going to make this right, he's going to give this awesome Ubuntu speech, it's going to elevate them back to glory status of being the number one team out of the East and possibly in the NBA. That's fine. But I don't see it. And it's hard pressed for you to sell me on the idea that this would be the proper climate to even endear yourself to that kind of thinking.
Hard pressed, you say? Well, hold my beer.
I was going to say cold press, but cold press is a lot healthier. This is not healthy right now, Shaw.
Listen, if it does go down in the way that it's reportedly potentially going, Doc has had a hell of a career. He's coached some really, really amazing talent. And it will be interesting to see if Milwaukee does turn it around. I just got off before recording and speaking to a good friend, Boston Globe writer Gary Washburn, who still talks to Doc from time to time. And Doc is in a situation, according to my guy Gary, where he's like, listen, this might be his last chance. And yes, he's had some great opportunities and coached some great players, but yeah, he knows he's not obviously getting any younger, right? And the opportunities to be at a championship level are few and far between. So if Milwaukee is interested, why would he not, leave the booth from ESPN and then jump on the sidelines there to get a chance to coach Giannis and Dame Lillard, and really bring the Eastern Conference, almost to its knees if he's able to try to get that team back to the promised land, how Milwaukee has reached, a few seasons ago. I think he looks at all those things and, as a competitor, he's like, listen, I think I can be that guy, but if it goes awry, we may never hear from Doc Rivers ever again. So it's a risk. It's a risk worth taking, I think, by all intents and accounts. Like, who wouldn't want to coach Giannis and Dame? And I think the Bucks are going to be very aggressive at the deadline here to try to get some stuff. And they don't have a whole lot of assets, but figure out what they can do to try to improve that defense, even just outside of the schemes that whoever's on that sideline is ultimately going to be running.
So you think that the Bucks have to get somebody from the outside in order to coach this team. So Joe Prunty, probably, you're looking at maybe 4 or 5 games before they make this decision to bring somebody in from the outside to help this team.
I mean, I don't, if you believe the report, like, it's getting close. Like, Doc could be announced as we're recording or tomorrow, right? That's how close it is. I don't know that they need to bring somebody else in, or if Doc is the right guy. Like, at this point, we know what it is. We're recycling head coaches. So if you need somebody to fix this situation here as it's currently constructed, then you probably do want a veteran guy. And what names are out there that, despite his more recent, not successes, but his more recent failures, if you will, who else can you bring in here now who has championship level experience, who is already not coaching, even as an assistant right now, that you would really trust with Giannis and Dame?
Well, let me ask you this question. Do you think Giannis and Damian Lillard would trust Doc Rivers? Right? Like, do you think that there is a possible pathway to respect that they are going to buy into? Because that to me ultimately is to what you're saying, Shaw. That's what this comes down to, right? I would think that both Giannis and maybe Damian defers to Giannis, but one of those guys is going to have the larger voice in the room on giving the thumbs up or the thumbs down on whether or not they want Doc Rivers to be the head coach or any coach from the outside coming in, unless they specifically know. Like if it was Terry Stotts, right? Do you think that he would come back to coach those guys given the circumstance and the situation of how he left? Is there that possibility?
If the players are truly the ones in charge here, if Doc Rivers is hired, then that's what they wanted, and I'll leave it at that.
Okay. So, and that's Shaw. I'm not saying I wanted you to be definitive in that. What I'm just saying is it's going back to the point of really understanding where the power dynamic lies right now in that organization. Because again, it could very well have been that the brass just felt like, you know what, you're just not getting it done, and we need to figure something out. So we're going to do this. Doesn't mean that they still deferred or went to Giannis or anyone in order to get what was going to happen, what was going to come down the pike. But it would be interesting to see where their voice resonates on the perception that they are running things. And if they want this head coach to be running the ship now, that the organization is going to have to acquiesce to doing it, given the way that they wound up firing Adrian Griffin.
Yeah, well, and acquiescing seems to be what organizations do nowadays. So, I wish nothing but the best to Adrian Griffin, and hopefully he gets another opportunity. In my previous conversation, we talked about some guys who are maybe it just doesn't work out, despite them being great assistants. Like moving that one chair over, that doesn't work out for them. And I think of a guy like David Fizdale, right, who just had a couple bites at the apple, as you like to say, and then now it's just again gone back to consulting or being an assistant coach. Now a great assistant coach alongside Frank Vogel in Phoenix. I'm not saying that's Adrian Griffin's path. I'd like to see him get another opportunity, but this league is very, very, it can be very unforgiving at times. And I think, as we know, the players themselves talk. So if Giannis and or Dame, get in there and start in the group chats of the NBA, great players, if you will, and say, hey, you know what, here's what he did here in Milwaukee and why we didn't like it. I would be interested to see if he does get another opportunity at that head coaching chair. He might need to take some time off in this to kind of get his head together, unfortunately.
My final thought on what you were just alluding to, Shaw, and maybe this is, I don't want to use this as a word of advice or anything, for Adrian Griffin, but this is why it's so important to be really vested in the community of the NBA coaches, right? Like, this is why it's important to have allies and assets by your side. Like, if Terry Stott wanted to come back and coach, I don't think anybody's going to mind. And there's going to be plenty of head coaches right now in the current NBA that would vouch for him being a legitimate head coach. And he's got the resume for that. Right now, if you're Adrian Griffin, while you have that 30-13 record, it will always be with a question mark, because you have an MVP, you had a perennial MVP, an NBA champion on your team, and primarily and essentially really almost an all-together NBA championship squad, like whatever was remaining from that, that team that won the chip. But for Adrian Griffin, I think where you're best suited for you to get those opportunities again is you have to endear yourself in the coaches community more, where more of them can speak up for you on your behalf on how good of a head coach that you are. There were murmurs about Bobby Jackson possibly getting some nods, and a couple of assistant head coaches that have spent quite a long time, but now they're moving in situations and they're moving up the food chain next to the more well-known, recognized, tenured head coaches that are giving opportunities and chances for their voices to resonate and for them to prove that they have what it takes to eventually run an NBA team. Whether or not that was the case for Adrian Griffin, I don't know. I'm just hoping that this time around, given the circumstance, he leans on that more instead of more of the rumored awkwardness that tends to happen, that he was very isolated. He didn't really talk to too many people. He didn't position himself to endear himself to either the players or the coaches. Like, you can't operate like that, man. And that will actually do yourself a disservice when later down the road comes to someone vouching for your credentials as being a leader of men and a gatherer of the flock.
Yeah, well, again, it's a very much a relationship business, and hopefully Adrian Griffin will continue to work on those relationships. And I'm not rooting against him in any capacity, as I alluded to here earlier on. While I I understood all the conversation. Well, what's wrong with the Bucks? What's wrong with the Bucks? I kept looking at the record. And I was like, I don't know what's wrong with the Bucks. But ultimately, there seemed to be something that was underneath the surface outside of that.
They're one of the few teams that when you look at them and you look at the record and you look at the way that they play, it's almost like they were really getting by on their talent. I honestly have had a hard time this year really identifying what this team.
This is a high stakes game, right? And I think, you're trying to make it in a layman's person is like, well, I'd like the opportunity to at least finish what I've started. Let me finish the job. And he didn't get a chance to finish the job. And the job, in essence, is at least a full season. So, it's an unfortunate situation. And we'll see if the Bucks ultimately decide to bring into that sidelines. And if it's Doc, well, it's going to make for a much more intriguing NBA season to close things out for sure.
It really be about the team, which may actually be a good thing because right now they got to get themselves right for people to be talking about how legit that the Milwaukee Bucks are.
Yes, sir.
Great show, Shaw. As per always, man, the NBA never fails on putting us on the spot, man. I'm glad we were able to hash out some of what's been going on in the association, sir.
Yes, sir. Again, no days of no drama in the NBA. So they keep us on our proverbial toes, keep the content churning, and it's only going to get more wild here as a lead up to the trade deadline here on February 8th. So stay tuned. We might be having more double duty weeks ahead of us in the near future.
Yeah, I know you're loving every single minute of it.
Yeah, well, my wife is not, but I hear you.
For the baseline, Kyle, Lee, Warren, Shaw, we appreciate you guys. Thanks for tuning in, and we will catch up with you next time.